Step aside. I've got a John Doe and a Bolo. I don't need warrants.
Lower your voice and leave this room.
He matches my suspect. I'm taking him now.
This is a hospital. You don't have jurisdiction here.
Keep blocking me and you're coming downtown too.
You really want to do
I don't
this
care who you think you are.
Then you should, because I'm federal. This patient's under protective custody.
The afternoon of April 13th, 2023, at St. Mary's Hospital seemed completely normal until a police officer entered room 447 and made a mistake that would destroy her 10-year career in less than 15 minutes. The man she tried to arrest was not a common criminal, not just any suspect, and definitely not someone who should have been approached the way she did. He was an FBI special agent protecting a critical federal witness, and the officer's body camera would capture every second of the disaster that was about to unfold. Special Agent Marcus Johnson was carrying out one of the FBI's most important missions at that moment. The man in the hospital bed behind him was a crucial witness in a massive federal case involving drug trafficking and money laundering. This witness had been attacked 48 hours earlier, a clear attempt to silence him before he could testify before the federal grand jury. The FBI wasn't playing around with his safety, and Marcus had direct orders not to let anyone unauthorized enter that room. Marcus had 12 years of experience in the FBI, had worked on cases involving domestic terrorism, white-collar crime, and criminal organizations. He knew exactly what he was doing and understood his rights and responsibilities as a federal agent. That day, he was wearing a dark suit with a light blue shirt, his FBI credentials hanging visibly around his neck, and his service weapon in its holster. There was absolutely no ambiguity about who he was or what he was doing there. The police officer who would enter that room was Officer Sarah Mitchell, a 10-year veteran of the local police department. Sarah had a history in the department that included 3 previous complaints related to differential treatment based on race, but none of them had resulted in significant disciplinary action. The department always filed these complaints away as misunderstandings or difficult situations. Her colleagues knew Sarah had a problem, but the department's culture of protecting their own meant she continued on the street with a badge and a gun. Sarah received a call about a possible disturbance at the hospital. The details were vague, something about an argument near room 447. When she arrived in the hallway, she saw Marcus standing outside the door, clearly in a guard position. Any properly trained officer would have immediately noticed the FBI credentials, would have made respectful contact, checked the situation, and left. But Sarah saw a black man in a hospital hallway, and her assumptions took over before her training. What happened in the next few minutes was captured in high definition by Sarah's body camera. Every word, every action, every moment of poor judgment would be recorded as evidence of the biggest mistake of her career. Marcus remained professional and calm, but Sarah was about to cross a line that would destroy everything she had worked for over the past 10 years, and there would be no going back. Sarah Mitchell approached Marcus with her hand resting near her weapon, her body language showing immediate suspicion. She didn't politely ask who he was or what he was doing there. She didn't notice the FBI credentials hanging clearly around his neck. She simply began demanding identification as if Marcus were an intruder instead of a federal agent carrying out his duty. Her body camera captured the exact moment when Marcus calmly pointed to the credentials on his chest, explaining his position and mission. Any reasonable police officer would have stopped at that moment. The FBI credential is unmistakable, with federal seals, an official photograph, and a unique identification number. Marcus even offered to show additional identification and provide his supervisor's phone number at the field office for verification. This was more than enough for any law enforcement professional. But Sarah wasn't interested in verification or proper procedure. She was operating on assumptions and prejudices that completely clouded her judgment. Sarah began insisting that Marcus was interfering with a police investigation, despite there being no police investigation happening. She claimed she had the right to enter that room to question the patient, completely ignoring the fact that Marcus had clearly explained the person in the bed was a federal witness under FBI protection. Federal jurisdiction supersedes local police authority in federal cases, something any officer should know from basic academy training. The tension in the hallway was rapidly increasing. Nurses and other hospital staff began noticing the confrontation. Some stopped to observe, others quickly took out their phones to record. Marcus remained standing, blocking the door to room 447, maintaining his professional posture while repeatedly explaining the situation. He wasn't being combative or disrespectful. He was simply doing his job and protecting a critical witness from unauthorized interference. Sarah then did something that would shock even her own colleagues when they watched the recording later. She grabbed her radio and called for backup, reporting that she had an uncooperative individual preventing a police investigation at the hospital. The way she described the situation made it sound like Marcus was a threat or a criminal obstacle, not a federal agent following direct orders. She was deliberately distorting the facts to justify her own misconduct. Marcus knew exactly what was happening. He had gone through extensive training on racial bias, on how some police officers treat black federal agents differently, on how credentials and authority sometimes don't matter when prejudice comes into play. He stayed calm, held his position, and internally began making mental notes about everything happening, knowing this would likely become an official incident that would need to be reported. 2 patrol cars arrived at the hospital in less than 5 minutes. 4 officers exited the vehicles and quickly went up to the 4th floor where the situation was unfolding. Sarah had painted a picture on the radio that made it seem like a real emergency, as if she were dealing with someone dangerous or potentially violent. The officers who responded arrived prepared for confrontation, hands near their weapons, serious expressions as they entered the hallway. What they found didn't match at all what Sarah had described. Marcus was still standing calmly outside the room, his FBI credentials clearly visible, making no threatening or aggressive movements. There were about a dozen hospital staff and visitors in the hallway now, many with their phones raised, recording everything. The situation seemed tense, but Marcus wasn't the source of the tension. It was Sarah, whose frustration and anger were visible in her face and body language. One of the responding officers was a veteran named Tom Richardson, who had 18 years in the department and had worked with federal agencies before. Tom looked at the scene, saw the FBI credentials around Marcus's neck, and immediately understood what was happening. His face changed from alert to concerned, and then to something that looked like embarrassment. He approached Marcus with visible hands, no threat, and politely asked if he could see the official identification. Marcus showed his complete FBI credentials, provided his supervisor's number, and calmly explained the entire situation. He was protecting a federal witness who had been attacked and was scheduled to testify in an important case. He had direct orders and complete federal authority to be exactly where he was. Tom nodded, understanding completely, and turned to Sarah with an expression that said everything. She had made a massive mistake, and he knew it. Tom tried to smooth the situation over discreetly. He told Sarah they needed to leave and let the federal agent do his work. But Sarah was too invested now, too committed to her wrong version of events. She began arguing that Marcus was being disrespectful, that he refused to cooperate properly, that there was something suspicious about the whole situation. Every word coming out of her mouth was being captured by multiple cameras, including her own. Then Sarah crossed the final line that would seal her fate. In front of her fellow officers, in front of witnesses, and in front of all those cameras recording, she reached for her handcuffs and declared she was arresting Marcus for obstruction of justice and interference with police duties. The moment froze in the hallway. Tom and the other officers were visibly shocked. Marcus remained perfectly calm, but his eyes showed he knew Sarah had just ended her career. The cameras continued recording every second of the biggest mistake any police officer could make, trying to arrest a federal agent for doing his job. Tom Richardson literally placed himself between Sarah and Marcus before she could put the handcuffs on him. The veteran officer knew that if Sarah completed this arrest, it wouldn't just be her career on the line, but potentially the credibility of the entire department. He spoke low but firm to Sarah, telling her to back down immediately and leave the situation. The other 2 officers who had responded also positioned themselves in a way to block any movement by Sarah toward Marcus. Marcus remained exactly where he was, not resisting, not escalating, just calmly observing while the local officers dealt with their out-of-control colleague. He had already taken out his phone and called his supervisor at the FBI field office. The conversation was brief and professional, Marcus reporting the facts of the situation while it was still happening. His supervisor said additional agents were on their way and that the FBI office would contact the local police chief immediately. Sarah finally began to realize the magnitude of what she had done. The adrenaline that had fueled her poor decision began to subside, and reality began to sink in. She looked around the hallway, saw all the phone cameras pointed at her, saw the expression on her fellow officers' faces, saw Marcus calmly talking on the phone with his superiors. Her body camera captured the exact moment when her face changed, when she understood she had crossed a line from which there was no return. 15 minutes later, 3 additional FBI agents arrived at the hospital. They came in unmarked vehicles, wearing suits, carrying the calm authority of federal professionals who knew exactly how to handle situations like this. The senior agent, a woman named Supervisor Jennifer Chen, went directly to Tom Richardson and Marcus. She verified the witness was safe, confirmed all details of the incident, and then turned her attention to Sarah. The conversation between Supervisor Chen and Sarah was professional, but icy. Chen explained that the FBI would be filing a formal complaint with the police department, that the incident would be investigated both internally by the FBI and by the local department, and that the body camera footage would be preserved as evidence. She also informed Sarah that interfering with federal duties was a federal crime and that the United States Attorney would be briefed on the incident. Sarah tried to explain herself, but her words sounded weak and defensive in the face of clear facts. Tom Richardson, to his credit, didn't try to protect Sarah or minimize what had happened. He provided his own honest account of what he witnessed when he arrived on the scene. He confirmed that Marcus had shown proper credentials, that the situation was clearly a legitimate federal operation, and that Sarah had unnecessarily escalated something that should have ended with a simple ID check. His testimony, coming from a respected veteran officer, would seal the case against Sarah in a way that no amount of union influence could undo. Sarah Mitchell's body camera was confiscated by the department that same night. Standard protocol in cases of serious police misconduct required all evidence to be preserved immediately to prevent any possibility of tampering. The recording was copied and stored in 3 different locations: the local police department, the FBI field office, and the United States Attorney's office. There would be no way for this evidence to disappear or be conveniently lost. Within 48 hours, the complete video leaked to local media. Someone inside the department, probably an officer tired of seeing misconduct swept under the rug, sent the recording to news stations. The video showed everything in crystal clear detail. Sarah approaching Marcus with immediate suspicion, Marcus calmly pointing to his clearly visible FBI credentials, Sarah ignoring the credentials and demanding identification as if Marcus were a criminal. The unnecessary escalation, the call for backup. And finally, the shocking moment when she tried to arrest a federal agent who was simply doing his job. The public reaction was immediate and furious. Social media exploded with the video being shared hundreds of thousands of times in the first 24 hours. People were outraged watching a black federal agent being treated this way while protecting a federal witness. Commentators pointed out that if Marcus were white, the situation probably would have ended the moment he showed his credentials. The visual nature of the evidence made it impossible to deny what had happened or create alternative narratives. The police department initially tried to distance itself from the incident. They issued a statement saying Sarah had been placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation was conducted. They emphasized that her actions didn't reflect the department's values. But investigators began digging deeper and found the 3 previous complaints against Sarah, all involving allegations of differential treatment based on race. These complaints had been filed away and minimized, but now they painted a clear pattern of problematic behavior the department had ignored. The internal investigation took 6 weeks, and the results were devastating for Sarah. Investigators concluded she had violated multiple departmental policies. She approached the situation without properly assessing the facts. She ignored proper official identification. She unnecessarily escalated a non-threatening situation. She falsely called for backup, claiming an emergency that didn't exist. She attempted to arrest someone without probable cause or legal authority to do so. And the report noted that her behavior showed evidence of racial bias that compromised her ability to serve as a police officer. The final decision came from the police chief under intense pressure from both the public and federal authorities. Sarah Mitchell would be fired from the department, effective immediately. Her police certification would be permanently revoked by the state board, which meant she could never work as a police officer anywhere in the state again. The union tried to appeal the decision, arguing the firing was too severe, but even they had difficulty defending her actions when the video evidence was so clear and damning. 10 years of career destroyed by 15 minutes of prejudice and poor judgment captured on camera. Marcus Johnson returned to work at the FBI 2 weeks after the hospital incident. The federal witness he was protecting successfully testified before the grand jury, leading to multiple indictments against members of an important criminal organization. The case Marcus was working on was successful, and his professional conduct during the confrontation with Sarah was praised by his superiors. He received a commendation for maintaining composure under pressure and protecting the integrity of a critical federal operation, even when facing unjustified harassment. But Marcus was also honest about the emotional impact of the incident. In a rare interview given months later, he spoke about how frustrating and painful it was to be treated like a criminal, simply for doing his job while black. He had dedicated his career to serving his country, had sworn to protect and defend the Constitution, and yet a police officer saw him as a threat before even considering his credentials or authority. This reality weighed on him, as it weighed on so many other black law enforcement agents who faced similar situations. Sarah Mitchell's case became an example used in police training across the country. Police academies showed the body camera video as a perfect case study of what not to do. Every wrong decision Sarah made was analyzed and discussed. Instructors used the recording to teach new recruits about the importance of properly verifying credentials, about the dangers of letting prejudices guide actions, about how a situation can escalate quickly when an officer doesn't follow proper procedures, and about the severe consequences of trying to arrest someone without legal authority. The police department that had employed Sarah faced a civil lawsuit filed by the ACLU and other civil rights organizations. The lawsuit argued the department had failed to adequately address Sarah's pattern of problematic behavior, and that this failure had created an environment where misconduct could flourish. The 3 previous complaints that had been ignored became central evidence in the case. The department eventually agreed to a settlement that included not just monetary compensation, but also mandatory reforms in how they handled complaints of racial bias. Sarah tried to rebuild her life after losing her career. She sought employment in private security, but the viral video made it almost impossible. Any employer who searched her name would immediately find the body camera recording and headlines about her firing. She gave an interview several months later, claiming she had learned from her mistakes and was working to be better. But her words rang hollow to many who saw the video and understood she had multiple opportunities to make the right choice that day at the hospital, and chose wrong at every turn. The federal witness Marcus was protecting survived, and his testimony led to convictions that dismantled a significant criminal network. The success of that case, protected in part by Marcus's refusal to let Sarah interfere, represented justice being served at the federal level. But the bigger story was about accountability in law enforcement. The body camera video that was supposed to protect Sarah from false accusations ended up being the evidence that proved her misconduct. The technology that police departments implemented for transparency did exactly what it should do. It captured the truth without filters or interpretations. And that truth clearly showed that racial bias still exists in law enforcement, that it can lead officers to make terrible choices, and that when those choices are captured on camera and brought to light, consequences can finally happen. 10 years of career ended because Sarah Mitchell saw a black man protecting a witness and decided he didn't belong there, and the camera on her own chest proved she was completely wrong.